weirdos. This is Brian Baugh, creator of Wulf and Batsy, back with you for another issue commentary. This time it's for issue 5, the third chapter of the Bizarre Experiment story arc. At first I had a difficult time deciding which scene to portray for the cover of issue 5. And then it hit me that it would be really fun to do the scene in the tunnel, which leads up to the big surprise ending. The composition is pretty simple. It's basically a circle with her in the middle. Pretty happy with the color scheme here as well. I feel like whenever I do color illustration and I go with a purple and green color scheme, I feel like I always get really good results with that. So, opening to the first page, we get this big splash image, picking up right where our previous issue left off, with our monster heroes, Wulf, Batsy, and Bill Bucklebones, confronting the villain, Professor Von Zagzog, in this very deformed mode. And you would think they were here to rescue the damsel in distress, Blonda Speckles, but actually none of these monsters have any good intentions for her. She just happens to be captured at the moment, and they just happen to be trying to kill him. And of course, here's all the Monstro Sapiens. And here's our title, Bizarre Experiments Part 3. This splash page was drawn in 2021 when I was putting all of this together for Alterna. I have talked many times before about how I originally drew these early Wulf and Batsy comics back in 2001 to 2003, and then self-published them in 2008. But the way the chapters were presented in the original self-published trade paperback version, the chapters ended and began in a slightly different place. And the page count limits on the alternate issues required me to sort of bump that ending to a different part of the story. So in order to make that transition a little smoother, I had to create a new splash page for the beginning of this issue. So yeah, so this image, if you get the original self-published version, this image is not in there. It was created recently for this edition. But it was a fun opportunity to sort of jump back into this old story that I did so many years ago and draw these characters again in this scene from a completely different camera angle. And now we go back into the old stuff. I love the fact that Batsy never quite curses. This is one of those funny things about old exploitation horror movies from the 60s and 70s. It's like they'll do all this gratuitous stuff with, all this gore and blood and violence, but it seems like they keep the cursing to a very tasteful, respectable minimum. It's almost like they're embarrassed, like, not ashamed to show off half-naked girls and blood and guts, but, we don't want our moms to hear us cursing. I'm kind of the same way. Anyway, Batsy says, "Gosh darn you, Zagzog." And Blonda says, "Look out, he's got a..." And he throws this meat cleaver and promptly chops her head off. Schlock. Yeah, nothing like killing off your damsel in distress on the very second page of the issue. Zagzog says, "And I've got something for you, too." And he pulls out this very lame-looking remote control. He pushes the button. Click. And Batsy says, "Hey, what's that noise?"
Oh, Mom, you're just jealous. It's the Beastie Boys.
Instead of just jumping out of the way, I never said Wulf and Batsy were the smartest monsters in the world. But we look up and we see that there's a big cage on a chain and it's falling and it catches Wulf. And he's not very happy about it. Batsy, looking very fetching in this shot in her European horror movie style nightgown, says, "Come on, Wulf, you ought to be able to break out of that puny little cage." And Zagzog says, "Weird ones, come to me." And Batsy turns and faces him. "That does it, Zagzog. Now you made me mad." Uh-oh. He's in trouble. He just laughs it off. "I'm sure. But first, look into my mirror." And this strange effect comes over Batsy where her body starts melting and stretching and she gets sort of sucked into this mirror, and so does Bill Bucklebones. Sucked right in there. Zwip! They're captured. Batsy says, what the? Zagzog trapped us inside a mirror? And then you go to this big panel where you see all of the characters in their terrible predicament. Wulf is trapped in a cage. Batsy and Bill Bucklebones are trapped inside this mirror. Blonda is decapitated. And Zagzog is gloating. And now that I have all of you exactly where I want you, let's get down to business. In the original self-published version, this was the last page of this particular chapter. It was only a 3-chapter story, not a 4-chapter story. And this was intended to be a big cliffhanger with the words, "to be continued" down here. But again, because of page count limits, we had to break it up a little differently for the alternate edition. But that's the way I originally planned it out back then, was to do the classic 3-act play structure, where the middle chapter put all the heroes in the worst position possible, with the bad guy, victorious, and then you'd find out how they got out of it in the 3rd chapter. Anyway, both of these gags with Batsy and Bill Bucklebones getting trapped inside a mirror and Wulf getting trapped inside of a cage had a lot to do with just trying to figure out a way to put these supernatural monster heroes in a situation where the bad guy really would have them captured and they really couldn't get away and they were stuck, and we would be wondering, how they're going to get out of this. And, there are some weird superstitions about mirrors having magical properties. And as the story goes on, I like this guy chewing on the mirror. We find out that the cage that Wulf is trapped in is made of iron and silver, 2 different kinds of metal that are known to have magical properties. But anyway, Zagzog is sort of explaining all of that here, and it's evident from his conversation that he doesn't even really understand how these things work. But I like this bit here where Zagzog grabs the meat cleaver that he used to decapitate Blonda and sort of nonchalantly pulls it out to sort of emphasize what he was saying. And this bit here, too, sort of explains why he even had these devices in the first place. He says, he's talking about the mirror, he says, "I bought it once I started conducting my experiments. I had a feeling the nature of my work might arouse an angry ghost or two, what with upsetting all those graves and mutilating all those bodies." So the idea is that because he was robbing graves to get all those corpses to create his Monstro Sapiens, he had a feeling it might cause a haunting. So he actually got, these objects like the mirror and the cage to battle any spirits that might come back for revenge. Needless to say, this was a fun page to do. This big splash page showing all the crowds of Monstro Sapiens. I really like this guy. With his deformed elephant man hands and his big giant tongue hanging out. And here's a baby head stitched to a severed hand. There's all kinds of fun guys in here if you look. But also, the other good thing about this splash page is that it kind of establishes the geography of the whole area that they're in, the whole scene. So you kind of understand the room and the relationships between where everything is spatially. It's not really consistent. I was still very new at this when I did this comic. But it's nice to set it up this way for the next few pages. I like this guy right here. "Hey, I can't see." "Shut up." Anyway, Zagzog's laughing. And he's taunting Wulf. He says, "But the bars of that cage are made from an alloy of iron and silver. But it's an ideal trap for beings of a more corporeal nature. Wouldn't you agree?" And Wulf just slashes him. Whoosh! Batsy's all for it. "Yeah, Wulf, get him, boy!" His biggest cheerleader. And Wulf has this interesting moment where he does something rather odd and uncharacteristic that I've never really had him do since, where he sort of transforms into this middle phase between wolf and human, just to deliver this dialogue. And he says, "An ideal trap, if only the bars were closer together." But he immediately changes back into his full wolf form And we see Zagzog's reaction. He can't believe it. Zagzog's loyal helper, Sludge, steps in and helps the boss. Zagzog says, "Did you see that, Sludge? The beast's face changed. What a hideous, ugly display." You know, obviously the joke there is, you know, you think it's ugly that his face changed? And then he's a total cruel bastard. He just doesn't even appreciate any help at all. "Let go of me, you sack of rotted filth." And Sludge backs up and bumps into Blonda's severed head.
"Master, this head, I love it. May I keep it?"
Zagzog snatches it away. "Give me that."
"But Master, I like her. She's pretty."
Slap! Batsy and Bill Bucklebones are just horrified by this treatment of poor old Sludge. Zagzog says, "Mindless oaf! You're supposed to protect me, and you let that beast claw my surgically restructured head. I can't believe how stupid you are. I meant you to be the best of my monstro sapiens, but your existence insults my ego." Poor Sludge. This is high drama here, folks. "Do you know why I never let you leave the house? Do you? Because you were my greatest failure. I'm embarrassed of you. I wish I'd never even built you in the first place." And then clock. Kicks him right in the face. Oh, man. And now the other monstro sapiens are seeing what their creator has done. Wulf does not approve at all, and neither does Batsy or Bill Bucklebones. This is a bad, bad guy right here. "Well, what are all of you staring at?" And I love this line. "Monstro sapiens, return to the shadows where you belong. The ghastly sight of your malformed visages is starting to make me nauseous." He just doesn't have anything nice to say to anybody. And, you know, here comes some more great Zagzog dialogue. First, Sludge says,
"I'm sorry I embarrass you. I don't mean to."
"Shut your mouth, Sludge. Your sniveling response to my commands only heightens the obscenity of your presence. Stay here and guard the prisoners. They will soon be destroyed, and so will you. I'm going upstairs to get the torture devices. When I return, I will show you what horror means." This line here, "I will show you what horror means." That line comes from Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, one of my absolute all-time favorite movies ever. But that's just one of my favorite evil lines of dialogue from a horror movie. And once I decided to borrow it here, I continued to use it as a catchphrase in various Wulf and Batsy stories after this. And so Sludge, all defeated, just goes away into the dark, leaving Wulf and Batsy and Bill Bucklebones wondering exactly how they're going to get out of these traps that Zagzog has captured them in. And I remember when I wrote this story, I actually got stuck myself trying to figure out how to get them out of there. And then it just hit me. Well, if Wulf changes back to his human form, he becomes small enough to fit between the bars. Of course, Batsy's saying, "I promise I wasn't peeking," because he has no pants on. He squeezes through the bars, goes across, and says, "Okay, I'm going to try something." Winds up, Batsy's covering her eyes, and he throws a big punch and just shatters the mirror. I mean, if you can't come up with a clever way to solve a problem, you just break something, right? But luckily, it works, because Batsy emerges up out of the shattered glass. And I have to say, you know, it's funny, when you make your own comics, there are times when you just, I don't know, draw an image that just makes you fall in love with your own characters all over again. And something about this little hug that she gives him, I don't know. I guess I'm a big sap, but to me that seemed very sweet. Cut to the upstairs portion of Zagzog's mansion. Notice the Venus flytraps. I was pointing those out in issue 4. Zagzog loves those things. He's got them all over his house. Anyway, Zagzog says, "I can't understand why everyone insists on making everything so difficult. Don't they see what I'm trying to accomplish here? He's so reasonable and rational. If only everybody would cooperate. So he grabs his face and starts pushing on his snout and squishes it flat. He reaches into this jar of formaldehyde and pulls out his human flesh face. Slaps it back on. Grabs a needle and thread and starts stitching it into place. And this is okay, again, I drew these comics during the years right before I met my wife, or, you know, the girl who would become my wife. And some of these lines here are sort of taken from my own frustrations back then. Like, just little things when I, as a bachelor, when I'd screw up cooking or whatever and I'd get something wrong, I'd always be like, this is the sort of time when it would be really nice to have a girlfriend. And that's what Zagzog says here, you know. Who am I kidding? I don't know how to sew. This is the sort of time when it would be really nice to have a girlfriend. A little bit of autobiography in there from the time when I was making these comics. And then remember when he said he was going to go upstairs and get the torture devices? Well, all he meant by torture devices was a big old chainsaw. Getting a little bit of that, you know, 1980s horror movie vibe going. Cut to this door that leads back down to the basement. It bangs open, and here's Zagzog. Abandon hope, all ye who enter this house of mystery. Little homage to the DC horror comic House of Mystery, which was one of my favorites as a kid. And then here he comes back down the stairs into the basement, and he says, the time has come for you to die, and I am here to finish you. And then, I gotta say, you know, Professor Von Zagzog has a lot of great dialogue, but this might be my all-time favorite line. When he says, you may take comfort in the fact that you will be murdered by a genius. But when he gets down to the basement, the room is empty. The werewolf is gone from the cage, the supernatural mirror is shattered, and Zagzog just rejects it. He says, no, this is incorrect. There was no scientific data to suggest they could have escaped. I do not accept this reality. See, he's a true man of science. He doesn't accept anything unless there's scientific evidence. Not even reality. Well, Bucklebones jumps up behind him and says, Zagzog! Whack! Knocks him across the room. Oh, man. But notice, he knocked him right next to this manhole cover. And then, in a supreme moment of horror, all three monsters rise up, and Bill Bucklebones says, you cannot bind us, human, for we are monsters, and to be human is to be our food. Part of this line is quoting one of my favorite Halloween records from when I was a little kid. It was this great record called Famous Monsters Speak. And on side A was the story of Dracula, and on side B was the story of Frankenstein's monster. And that record was like poetry to me. There was so many great lines of over-the-top horror dialogue in that record. And I listened to it so many times as a kid while I was drawing monsters that I have it memorized to this day. I've stolen little snatches of dialogue from that record and used them as catchphrases in Wulf and Batsy now and then. That's one of them. I like this funny exchange between Zagzog and Batsy. He says, I told you, I'm not human anymore. I'm the first of a new race. And she says, new race, shmoo race, prepare to die. Like, what kind of dialogue is that for a serious horror comic? And Zagzog, who always has a way out, you know, he opens up this manhole cover and he goes, you will not kill me. I have too many things to do before these eyes see hell. And then, Batsy, being the good little vampire girl who doesn't curse, she says, shucks, we lost him. and for some reason, Bill Bucklebones gets all Shakespearean, where he's like, nay, thy sewer shall be his grave. Cut to Bill Bucklebones and Wulf going down the ladder. And then they're down in this sewer tunnel. And here comes Batsy down the ladder, but snap, one of the rungs breaks and she falls. Splash. Bill Bucklebones says, you okay? And of course it's all just, one big pig-headed excuse to get her nightgown wet. But she's like, ew, icky sticky. And Bill Bucklebone says, Wulf has the scent. He will lead us to vengeance. And, for all the humor of Wulf and Batsy, and as much as I kind of poke fun at it for its sort of goofy exploitation qualities, I don't know. I gotta say, I always kind of found this moment a little bit genuinely creepy. Like, there's something kind of cool and spooky and creepy about these loser monsters slowly, relentlessly following their enemy for revenge. Like, you just know they're never going to give up. They're never going to stop following him until he is dead. So Wulf comes around the corner. Always liked this drawing of Wulf. I think that one came out pretty good. I love drawing with a brush, but up until this time period, I was sort of using the brush strictly for things like, wet grass, water, really organic things. Now I was starting to use it to draw everything. Werewolf fur, it's really good for werewolf fur. These textures on the wall. I was getting a little braver with my brushes here at this point in drawing this story. Anyway, they arrive at the end of the tunnel, and Zagzog has come to sort of a dead end. There's this hole in the wall, another tunnel leading out. But he's not scared. He's standing his ground. He says, took you long enough to get here. I like this dialogue exchange, too. Bill Bucklebone says, it's over, Zagzog. No matter how far you run, we will follow you to the end of the earth. And Zagzog, who has an answer for everything, says, run from you? Ha! I led you down here. This is the end of the earth. Where else would I keep my greatest creation? And Batsy says, your greatest creation? Zagzog says, yes, behold the Orbopod. And we get this giant splash page of this huge, hideous, giant eyeball monster with this mouthful of jagged, sharp teeth and these tentacles. The Orbopod was an homage to the 1958 monster movie, The Crawling Eye. I always loved that movie and those crazy monsters in it. The big difference with mine is the Crawling Eye monsters didn't have the big sharp teeth. They were just big eyeballs with tentacles. But I love to draw monsters with big old sharp teeth, so darn it, my Crawling Eye has a big scary mouth. It's also a little bit of an homage to the ending of Stephen King's novel It, in which the Crawling Eye makes a brief cameo appearance. I'll let you read that book and figure out how that makes sense, but yeah, he does. Oh, and then it says, to be continued. So this is our cliffhanger for this particular issue, and we will find out how the adventure continues in issue 6. So that's Wulf and Batsy issue 5. Just another ultimate experience in gruesome horror. I hope you'll join me again next time when we look at issue 6, the final chapter of the Bizarre Experiments story arc. Oh, and by the way, if you enjoy these comics, if you love Wulf and Batsy, do me a favor and order the physical issues so you can have these cool comics and read them for yourself in person. The more sales we get, the more comics we can make. That's how it works. Every issue you order keeps Wulf and Batsy out of their graves and haunting the earth just a little longer. And, if these comics are too scary for you, order them anyway and give them to somebody you don't like. Happy nightmares.